Great things happen when we work together and compromise. But we all know that new funding is only half the solution to our transportation challenges. New funding must accompany a new way of thinking about transportation. We should not measure progress in terms of how many lane miles we build or how many dollars that we spend. Instead, we need to look objectively at the benefits of what a project will provide. Virginia's long-term growth and economic competitiveness is dependent on building a 21st century workforce and ensuring that our businesses can move their goods efficiently. We now have the chance to build a transportation system that makes a real difference in the lives of Virginians. We can build a transportation system that lays the foundation for long-term economic growth and cements our competitive advantage in this 21st century economy.
In the future, there are going to be winners and losers. Cities that are going to be in the winning column and in the losing column. And it's going to come down to workforce. What regions, what cities, what towns are going to be attractive to our future workforce? And we believe transportation is going to play a key role in attracting the workforce in the future. So what we're going to do for the next few minutes is talk about 4 topics. We're going to talk about the biggest trends that we see. In fact, the biggest trend that's affecting every town, county, and city across Virginia. We're going to also talk about implications for Virginia, what this means, and what we should be doing about it right now. And then understand the change agents, because it's that generational lens that gives us a unique insight on what the future is likely to be. And then we're going to end with some implications for VTrans2040, the work that is being put together to help localities across Virginia understand the future. All right, let's talk about the biggest trend. In the U.S., the people 65 plus are projected to grow exponentially from 38 million today to 72 million by 2030. And people call this the age shift because we're fundamentally shifting to an older population. It's best explained with the population pyramid. Ever since the dawn of time, we've always had more people alive in the younger ages than in the older ages. But this is fundamentally shifting. If you look back starting in 1960 at the population pyramid with men on the left and women on the right at these different age bands, you can see with the baby boomers, the bulge that they are, and the pig and the python that they're creating going through our population with a lesser birth rate behind them is fundamentally shaping this population pyramid. It's actually shifting and more into a population rectangle. So what does this mean? Well, what this means for America is that we're going from approximately 10% of our population being senior to 20% being senior. If you look at this same population pyramid for Virginia, going back to 1990, you can see it's fundamentally shaped like a pyramid. And this is changing shape right before us into that population rectangle. So Virginia, just like America, is going to be a lot older. The graying of Virginia is taking place, and it's taking place in every community across the Commonwealth. We've never had this before. There are going to be relatively fewer younger people in our society and relatively more older people in our society. Well, this changes everything, and it changes the way we need to think about transportation and its role in our future. So let's talk about that, the implications for Virginia. Let's talk about what it means in terms of Virginia's future workforce. There's going to be a coming battle for workers. Let's take a look at the demographic projections for the U.S. workforce. Projected to grow from about 155 million today to 163 million by 2022. And where is this growth going to take place? Well, it's not in that sweet spot of the American workforce today. Ages 20 to 54 is where the bulk of U.S. workers fall. And today it's 101 million, and it's projected to grow to 103 million, hardly any growth by 2022. Well, let's look at that younger workforce where usually a lot of creative energy is placed. Well, when you look out into the future, we're projecting that that's going to actually shrink in size back to that shifting population pyramid. Where's the real growth going to take place? It's going to be the older workforce, projected to grow from 32 million to 41 million by 2022. So what does this mean? It means there's really going to be a battle for workers, especially younger workers, and the right kind of older workers. To attract the right workforce, we're going to have to be more attractive than other states. We're going to have to really think about how do we attract older workers, the right kind of older workers that really want to stay in the workforce. And how are we going to become a younger workforce hub? How are we going to get more younger people to say Virginia's the place they want to be? And we believe transportation is going to be a key part of that equation. It's going to play an increasingly important role in making Virginia a great place to be for younger workers and older workers. So let's get into understanding this a little bit more. Let's get into understanding who these change agents are. Who are the younger workers and who are the older workers? And that's where we rely on our generational lens. We look at demographic data and we overlay that with societal trends and cultural trends to really set a lens onto the future. But when we do that, we have found the most profound way to pull this all together is to look at a generation, to look at generational cohorts and to understand how they're wired. Because they are, in fact, the change agents. We believe generation matters. And generation matters big time when it comes to thinking about what our workforce is going to look like and what people are going to want in a place to live, work, and play. What makes a generation are the defining events that happen during their wonder years, when they're coming of age. Those defining events really shape deep-seated generational values. And those generational values, those shared values of a cohort, really lead to who they are, really helps define a generation. So let's talk about boomers and think about what was going on when they were coming of age. Think about at the very beginning, even as infants. Dr. Spock arrived not from another planet, but from medical school. And he wrote a best-selling textbook all about a new parenting style, about having the child being taken care of their physical development, but also their mental development, also the way that they think about themselves. And so this parenting style raised people in a very self-confident way. And television arrived. And television was only about this big, but all the shows that were first started in the infancy of television were all positive shows. It was all just reinforcing this sense of self. And then the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and other organizations took off. The suburbs took off. The GI Bill made the silent generation gain economic prosperity. And so as boomers, as kids in their wonder years, they saw all of this happening. It seemed like every year was better than the past year. And society was falling all over themselves to take care of this huge cohort. And then the space race. Think about what happened there. We were actually behind at first, behind the Soviet Union. And then we put our mind to it, and our president said, we're going to the moon. And we figured out how to do that. And then things in society that we might not have liked, well, boomers changed it. We might not have led the protest against Vietnam or Watergate, but we certainly were the foot soldiers. So boomers are basic change agents because of how they were wired when they were younger. All those defining events in the wonder years shaped the values that boomers have. Personal gratification, entitlement, control, work ethic, no to the status quo, a profound sense of optimism. So these all lead to the generational cohort traits that boomers share of really being driven, transformational, and self-centered. So if there's one thing to keep in mind about boomers, is that they really are self-centered, not selfish, but self-centered. Now, one part about boomers that we really want to make sure everyone understands is this transformational aspect. Boomers are transformational. If you think back on society and all the changes that have taken place on boomers' watch, it's profound. We have really changed some fundamental societal aspects of America. And there's one left to go for boomers, and that's changing what the future of aging's like, transforming what it's like to grow older. Historically, when you look at the way people think about a lifespan is that everybody's gearing up and reaching their peak about age 50. And then from there, it's sort of downhill, slowly into retirement and then into the life beyond. So this is the way that curve of life has been represented. Well, boomers are realizing that the longevity bonus that their parents got and now that they're getting is really happening to them right here at age 50 to 60. We're seeing boomers say, oh my gosh, I've got another half of life to live. So this idea of going off to Sun City and just retiring and going into pastimes just for a few short years doesn't make sense. In our research, we're seeing boomers say, I'm going to age in place and I'm going to do things differently. Now, maybe I'm not going to live in the house that I've been in the last couple of decades. I might move to a smaller place, but I'm going to do something else. I'm going to continue to work. And what we're seeing is that boomers are some of the best workers America has ever seen. In fact, it's boomers that are ushering in a new wave of entrepreneurialism across America and being successful entrepreneurs at that. Article after article is profiling boomers as really the successful startups. And it makes sense. They've had a whole lifetime of work to really appreciate what works. So using this generational lens, when we think about the future of transportation, we think part of it is making sure that you're building the environment that boomers really want. And let me put this into context for transportation. In America today, 1 in 7 drivers are 65 plus. In 23, because of that age shift, in 2030, because of that age shift, it's going to go to 1 in 7 drivers being 65 plus. The truth about growing older is that you can't escape the physical realities or consequences of growing older. In fact, when you look at it, we don't see as well, we don't hear as well, and actually intersections can be a little more confusing. You just don't process information the same way. So transportation has to take this into account. And the good news is, in a lot of states, including Virginia, we're already planning for this. We're starting to see stop signs with LED lights to make sure we get your attention on that important notice. We're also seeing decals and signs printed on the pavement so we can tell people this is where you are, this is what's going on. And boy, you just can't miss the buzz around these autonomous vehicles, these driverless cars that Google and others are coming out with. It makes perfect sense if you think about the age shift that's taking place. But also, some innovative solutions like Uber and Lyft are happening. And that makes perfect sense because we're not going to be able to be as mobile independently in the future when you think about boomers and how many boomers they are and the need to keep moving around. So the idea of a car-light community is really taking shape now, a car-light life even. And so what we talk about is the need for 15-minute communities where you can get everything that you need to do from continuing to stay in the workforce, to shopping, to entertainment, to every aspect of your quality of life. And we're not just talking about 15-minute communities downtown, we're talking about activity centers that can be all over a community, a big city like Richmond or Norfolk or Roanoke or Northern Virginia, but also even smaller communities like Charlottesville and Waynesboro, having activity centers where you're putting the population density so people can enjoy an entire quality of life within a 15-minute perspective. So now let's go at the other end of the spectrum and let's talk about millennials and talk about the future when we're going to have relatively fewer younger people in our society. And so what's going to make them pick Virginia? What's going to make the people that graduate from Virginia's colleges stay in Virginia? Well, you've got to go back to their wonder years when they were coming of age. Think about what was going on in our society during that time. We had the Gulf Wars, and they've sort of continued since then. We've had profound domestic violence. We've had a lot of terror even in our schools. And we've had the huge unfortunate event of 9/11. Well, add to those defining events over-involved parenting and the ubiquitous nature of technology. All of those have conspired to shape generational values of millennials of being kind of uber confident, having a sense of civic duty, because after all, many schools now, you can't get your report card until you've done volunteer service. Achievement, hyperconnectivity. These guys are incredible multitaskers. They're listening to music while they're surfing on the internet and performing a job function. And they're fearless. They feel like they can walk through walls and maybe even change the world. Well, the two things that we've studied about millennials that we think have had the most profound impact are how they were raised and how they're wired. 67% of millennials were born to boomers determined to do parenting right. We did a big study for the Florida Retail Federation, and we asked kids in high school, how were they choosing colleges? Who was really helping them? And we asked kids in college, how were you selecting your major? Who were your biggest influencers? And we asked kids in their first job, how did you pick your first job? Who were your biggest influencers? And in every case, it was my parents, my parents, my parents. We have basically raised all-stars, at least in their own mind. We have given them this uber confidence that they can achieve great things, that they can walk through walls. The second real big force that shaped millennials is how they're wired. You can look at a millennial without seeing them on their cell phone, communicating with someone else. In fact, the people in this photograph are texting each other. Well, what we think has happened here with technology is it created a sense of codependence. We think that millennials are codependent on one another. Millennials have a collective sense of self. We've created a new way of living. And what that's done is it's created sort of a new archetype of a cohort. So millennials are ambitious, they're codependent, and we also think they're purposeful. And so when we think about what millennials want from a workforce, they want to see their employer contribute to some social or ethical cause that they think is important. Now, other generations want this too, but millennials are leading the way. So to recap millennials, the one word to keep in mind is the collective self. They're not self-centered like boomers. They're really all about the collective self. So what does this have to do with transportation and thinking about where millennials want to live? Well, it has everything to do with it. Millennials are ushering in a new expression of community, hyper-community. In our research, we're finding millennials want to be in a place that has an urban feeling, an urban setting. Again, this doesn't mean they want to be in every downtown, but they want to be in activity centers. They want to have a new shared sense of place. Millennials, after all, the social media for millennials has really replaced sort of the social need that boomers had that was fulfilled by riding around in cars and being together. Millennials can be together and hyper-connected through technology. And so when they get together, they want to be in this shared place. And the place that they call home can be a lot smaller. In fact, we're seeing a phenomenon across the country where millennials are living in these micro apartments, smaller than 40-foot tractor trailers. In public space, it's becoming all the rage. This is a shot of outside the Denver Union Station where it's just an activity center, a park designed for people to have a third place to hang out. And inside this multimodal center, it's an activity place that looks very much like a college rec hall where people can come and spend time together and have a shared experience. Well, this is also having a profound impact on employers. In our research, when we talk to millennials and ask them, what companies do you want to work for? You would think we would hear the largest companies in every community. But that's not what we're hearing through our research. Where do millennials want to work? Well, they want to be part of startups. Blanchard's Coffee, Nectar Shades, Richmond Thread Lab, Shaco Denim. These were the kind of companies that millennials were calling out as the example of places that they want to work. Sure, they're going to work for some of the big companies, but the idea is that millennials have this entrepreneurial feeling and really celebrate startups more than we ever have in our society. So what are some of the traits of communities of the future with millennials leading the way? Well, there's this new sense of sharing, We're entering sort of a sharing economy. And enabled by technology, we're having whole businesses created where you can share your apartment if you go away for the weekend. Airbnb is one of those. And think about the presence of food trucks in every community. This is also about sharing. Sharing is caring. And it was a way to bond millennials together. So going all the way to transportation and the future of transportation, we see millennials having a profound impact on how transportation is going to shape communities of the future and make them attractive for the millennial workforce. Millennials, we also call them Gen Ys, are much less car-centric than the older generations. If you talk to DMV, they'll give you the statistics that 40, 50 years ago, the number of 16-year-olds that got their driver's license was about 50%. Today, it's a third. And it's changing the way people buy cars. The percentage of new cars sold to 21 to 34-year-olds, back in 1985, it was 38%. Today, it's 27%. So what's happening is that car ownership's being replaced by sharing transportation. So bike sharing's taking off in all of the major cities across the country. Car sharing is taking off. And even sharing your cars if you happen to own one, just like sharing your apartments. There are many sites where you can put your car up for lease. And now with Uber and Lyft, there's a whole new way of sharing the ride. And we're seeing this taking off all across America and even across the world. So what do millennials want in a place? Well, they want more walking paths. They want more biking paths. They want more designated bike lanes. 66% of millennials place a high-quality transportation in their top 3 concerns when evaluating where they want to move to a new place. 75% believe they're going to live in a place that doesn't require a car. So our own placemaking research, when we get really down to understanding what makes a millennial select a place to live, we find that the attributes fall across 2 major categories. The basics on what millennials need, which is basically a safe environment, to have a variety of employment options, to have a quality of and affordable housing, those basic attributes, and then placemaking attributes. And these are the cultural aspects of community, how innovative it is, how creative it is, how accepting it is of diversity. So understanding where your community falls in offering these basic attributes and placemaking attributes is critically important. And what we're seeing in part of those placemaking attributes is that bikeability, walkability, having easy public transportation are critically important. Because what millennials want is exactly what aging baby boomers want. They want a car-light lifestyle. They want that 15-minute walkable community. So transportation and mobility are part of that equation, creating that desirable place. And it's having an impact even in the way we think about economic development. The fundamental economic development model is shifting. It used to be that we would go after those large employers, and when one would say yes and come to a state like Virginia, then everything else would follow, including people, and a community would grow and create a great place. The new thinking on economic development, the shifting model, is moving to an idea of creating a great place first. And with that great place, people are going to come, workers are going to come, the creative class is going to come. And when you have that great place and a great workforce, then companies are going to follow, and companies are going to spring up from this new creative enthusiasm that millennials are bringing to startups. And ultimately, more and more employers will follow, and the community grows. So understanding that is to understand the future of where Virginia is headed. Well, this model is being proven over and over again right now. It's consistent with the latest studies and reports that are being put out. It's also consistent with the plans that are being developed. And you don't have to look very hard to find cities as large as Denver putting together millennial game plans on how to create a great place that's attractive to millennials. In fact, Oklahoma City just came out with its plan, a millennial game plan. It's also consistent with what we're hearing from business leaders in quotes about why they're making decisions on their office locations. This is from Kim Jordan, the CEO of New Belgium Brewery. They decided to build their East Coast manufacturing facility in Asheville, North Carolina. And when you ask Kim, what was the big decision? We wanted to help create a place where our young citizens want to be, where they could walk and bike to work. It's really about providing an environment that people can get their arms around as a place to live and work in that 15-minute activity center. So, in essence, plan, build, and support a transportation system that supports the future workforce, that's attracted to the future workforce, that's a fundamental part of your placemaking activity. So yes, this means continue to invest in roads. We gotta have roads. We're not gonna give up cars. But it also means aggressively support more transit, better bike trails and related support for biking, more and more multimodal hubs that allow people to use one mode and another seamlessly. And in fact, more and more tools to help people get along in an easier way, like 511 and the new Park and Ride Lot website that you can tap into to understand where park and ride lots are located in your community. And more innovative mobility options like Uber and Lyft and the other ones that are going to follow, enabled by technology. So the time is now. The time is now for us to get on this road to placemaking with transportation at the center of it. Over the next 10 years, it's going to be the key period in the American life on what communities get it and become winners in the future and what communities don't. And we believe Virginia has a head start because of the information and the research that's being advanced by VTrans2040. Thank you very much.